acknowledge that we were founded on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Attawandaronk, the Mississauga and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and now live on land that is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We have many representatives working across this land now known as Ontario, and we acknowledge that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory. We are grateful to be able to work and live on this land, and thankful to the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who have cared for these territories since time immemorial, and who continue to contribute to the strength of Ontario and to all communities across the province. To continue to center reconciliation, we encourage our team, partners, students, and teachers to take time to learn about the lands they are currently on. Visit native-land.ca for more information.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual field trip. My name is Rachel, and I'm your host from Farm and Food Care Ontario. For the first day of spring, it only seemed fitting to show you how farmers get ready for their planting season. Today, we'll be visiting Farmer Steve, a grain and oilseed farmer in southwestern Ontario, to see how he gets his equipment ready to get planting. We're going to learn about the planter, what that is, the technology available to farmers, and how to stay safe around farm equipment. Throughout the tour, please put any questions you have in the chat for our host to answer. As with some farms located in the country, the internet connection at Steve's farm isn't very stable. So Farmer Steve has recorded a few parts of his tour and will be joining us partway through from the tractor to answer some of the questions. The first stop on the tour is to take a look inside his tractor and see what kind of technology he's got going. So let's get us started.
I'm Steve Sickle. I'm a grains and oilseeds farmer here in southwestern Ontario. I have corn, soybeans, winter wheat, and hay. The first three crops I mentioned, corn, soybeans, and wheat, they all end up in the grocery store as food for everyone to consume and eat. And some of it will also make animal feed, and I have beef cows on this operation here at home as well. I farm here with my wife and my two kids. Kara, she's in third year university, and Ethan's in grade 9. I'm sitting here in one of my planting tractors. This one plants soybeans. It's March right now, and we're prepping for a spring season. We're looking at what the weather's like. We'll probably be doing that in maybe 4 to 6 weeks, hopefully. Right now is prepping season. All winter's been prepping season. My motto is winter's never long enough, and all of a sudden here we are spring and we're not ready. But we're learning and doing new things, and now we're push comes to shove, we got to get ready in about 4 weeks. So in this tractor, we've got to prepare our software. We've got to update software in my planting monitor and also my GPS monitor. We'll have to look on their websites and make sure we have up-to-date software in that as well. You young kids can probably update that easier than I can. I'll probably get my son to help me do that. But it's fairly intuitive. So this monitor here is the GPS. If you back up, Lauren, there's a beacon on the roof that searches satellites up in the sky, and that's what guides me through the field, and that's so it knows where I am in the field. And then I have prescriptions or maps that I make prior to planting, and that's one thing I have to do yet, to variable rate my fertilizer and my seed as I'm going across the field, so I can maximize my seed and fertilizer, so I'm not over applying or under applying the seeds in each spot of the field. Higher yielding spots in the field or higher producing spots in the field require more seeds and also require more fertilizer. And then poorer spots in the field, because of my location here, I have lots of hills. So the hilltops are poorer producing, further from water because of their elevation. So you plant less seeds there and put less fertilizer there, which is good for the environment and helps my wallet too. So this monitor guides the tractor. So when I'm planting, I can push this button here, which will lock on my auto steer. So then my tractor will follow this line. I'm sitting crossways to a line in this where I'm sitting in the shed here, but it will follow the line all the way across the field until I move the steering wheel or hit that switch again to shut it off, I have to physically turn around at the end and come back on my next pass based on the width of my planter. This one's 20 feet, the other planter's 30 feet. So you set that in here, and when you get close to the line, when you turn around, you lock it on and it'll follow me back down the field. So that enables me, while the tractor is steering itself, to keep an eye on this monitor that's dropping seed and fertilizer. And also I usually sit cornerways in the seat, and I'm usually looking backwards, watching the planter to make sure not just a visual of the monitor, but physically if there's stones jammed, anything plugged that I can physically see, make sure all my shafts are turning properly. The ones that aren't monitored in here, I can't see the physical shafts turning in the corn meters that drop the seed or meter the seed, but this will tell me all of that. And I can change my vacuum, which is, there's a fan on the planter that sucks seed to a disc, and you want one seed on every disc. So I can manipulate the pressure a little bit to suck harder that seed against the disc, or not as hard, so you only get one seed versus no seeds. Sometimes if you have too much vacuum, you can put two seeds against a disc. So you want to have one seed. So this will tell me my singulation percentage. If I'm doing a lousy job, it'll be 98, 98.5. If I'm doing a good job, it'll be 99.5%, or even 100%. And that means one seed is on every cell of the disc. Also, I'm monitoring here downforce, which is the amount of ground contact or pressure I'm exerting on the soil with my row unit that cuts the trench in the soil. I want to not over compact the soil, because we want a healthy soil seed environment that's got air and water around it. And if we over compact it, that eliminates water and air from getting to the seed. So I can adjust that on the go, and the planter also adjusts when I can manipulate my sweet spot of where I want it set, and then the planter will adjust. So if I cross a wheel track in the field, the planter adjusts as I cross that wheel track.
Wow, so that was a great look at the technology available to farmers inside their equipment. So I'm going to bring Farmer Steve on to answer some of your questions. Hello, Steve. How are you today?
Morning.
So I've got a question to kick us off. With all that technology in your tractor, it looks pretty complicated. How do you know what settings to pick?
Well, a lot of it comes down to experience. I've done it for a lot of years, and the more you know, the better you are at it. But then again, sometimes nature throws a curveball at you, and you think you know. Like, we always have to plant. We can adjust the planter for depth, and that's in the next video. But sometimes the weatherman says it's good, the ground is fit today to plant, and you plant the moisture, and that's fairly deep, and all of a sudden it turns wet. Now those seeds are too deep, so they take longer to emerge, and sometimes we lose. A few won't emerge because they're planted. So yeah, it comes down to experience. And yes, there's lots of technology. My son, who's 9, he can plant corn now because he's rode enough years beside me that he knows what to look for.
So how long have you been farming, Steve?
I've been farming probably 43 years.
And how do you know when the soil is perfect for planting?
Well, you look at the forecast and the calendar date. Certain crops need different conditions. If the soil is dry enough, which means you'll see it drying off, or you'll dig some up with a shovel and you'll squeeze it in your hand and drop it. If that chunk of soil or that piece of soil in your hand breaks apart when it hits the ground, it's dry enough. If it stays or you're squeezing water out of it, it's still too wet. We don't want to go across the soil when it's that damp, because we'll hear it, even with the seed trench with the planter, and then those roots have trouble getting out of that seed trench.
So your video said that you can see how deep the seeds are going. You can let the tractor drive itself. But what happens if that technology fails? Is there a backup plan?
This will let me plant manually. Last year when we were planting, there was a lot of solar flares at the time of planting, and that was a bit of a headache. I was still glad I had markers on my planter, which swing off to the side, and then you put your hood of your tractor on that mark. So I was glad I still had markers, because there was times crossing the field when my GPS got lost, and then your variable rate goes out, doesn't work as well. So I was just planting a solid rate, and then I could adjust my population manually because I knew going over a hill, I didn't want that population that high or that low in a good spot. So there is some fail safes. It's not perfect, but usually we can keep going.
So it sounds like you've always got to keep your old tactics handy just in case.
Somewhat, yes.
So what would you say is the most important piece of technology on the farm?
GPS makes our life a lot easier. I don't come home near as tired because the tractor can steer itself. GPS is pretty important now, and yet I don't use the GPS on my headlands because of my trees. I don't see as many satellites, so it's not as accurate. So I still find I use markers and steer on headlands.
Okay, so next we're going to jump into the soybean planter and take a look at how the seeds get into the ground. And then we'll bring Steve back on to take a look at the tractor.
So again, this is the soybean planter. This is the part that engages with the soil. My soybean planter. And I've got an open meter here for you to see, kind of to figure out how we meter seed into the soil. So we have a picket fence stand. When I say picket fence, like a fence with all the board and battens on it, we want all the seed spaced evenly apart. So this seed disc spins, and this is not soybean seed. This is corn seed. Sorry, I don't have any soybeans, but this corn seed's a little bit bigger than soybeans. But each soybean seed is supposed to sit on that cell. So this spins, and you want one seed in each hole. So then, Ethan, if you take that seed, so that disc sits here on that shaft, and we have a vacuum system, so there's air being sucked into this cavity, and this disc seals to it. I actually had that wrong. The seed sits on this side, on the flat side. That creates a venturi, which is graters the suction, makes the suction higher as the air draws through that hole. So then the seed sits on here. So that's locked in there with a pin that I've got sitting here. That locks on there, and then that disc, this flips over and sits on this, like so. This is driven this way with this little electric motor. So every row is driven by a little electric motor. So that's how we get our variable rate. This little motor can change speeds as I'm driving. So then we've got a singulator here that knocks any doubles off while it's still sucking seed, because this is running this way on the vertical while we're planting. So the seeds have to be sucked to this disc as this is spinning around. And as we come around, this brush cuts the air off. Actually, sorry, these wheels cut the air off and knock the seed out of the hole, and then it goes down the seed tube. This is the top of the seed tube. There's another extension, because this meter is sitting up in here, and the seed goes into the soil down here at the seed discs. So that's a little bit of an overview how the meter works, to how we singulate seed to get the seeds evenly spaced and the proper population over a set area in a field.
Wow, so it's amazing to see what the inside of a planter looks like. I'm going to bring Steve back here to answer a few more questions. Hello, Steve.
Hello again.
So that looked like quite the complicated setup inside the planter. I hope you were able to get that all back together.
Yes, there's 16 of them on that planter that we all have to go over yet and put them all on. So you get stored off the planter for the winter.
So what happens if your equipment breaks down? I'm sure you don't just bring it into the car shop to get fixed.
No, a lot of that stuff gets done by myself and some diagnosis, but I have a fair number of parts on hand myself, and then it's usually a phone. If I can't, then it's a phone call or two looking for what I need.
Okay, and do you want to give us a little look at what we're seeing here inside the tractor?
I'm sitting here in the tractor with it running right now. Sorry the screens blink at you, but that's the way it works. Let me flip this over. It's messing with me there. We're back. So if I drive here like so, You can see that little beep makes this auto steer lock on, and see how this little green is green. Now that steering wheel is steering itself. I'm not touching the steering wheel, and it's following that line. It's beeping because I'm 10 inches off the line. Now I'm getting closer, 8, 7, 6, and it's just going to stay on that line. So that's how auto steer works. So it's following that white line on the screen. I'm not mapping. If I was planting, I'd be drawing a blue line on that screen. And I'd also be showing it on my planting screen too, right here. That would be mapped as green. And I'd also be mapping it on my iPad. As you can see, I got my iPad in here as well. So the iPad is hooked to here. And then everything that's mapped in here is mapped in here. And then when I'm done planting, I can take the iPad, or partway through the season, if I see a problem in the field where there's less seeds or too many seeds, or why is it doing poorly, I can take the iPad to the field and go, okay, the planter wasn't the problem, or the planter is the problem. Maybe there's one row that looks goofy on every pass. It's like, okay, yes, I missed seeing that when I was planting. And yes, the planter did a poor job, or the planter's not the problem. It's something else going on in the field from a separate incident that could have occurred.
So it sounds like it maps it pretty dead on to the inch or to the centimeter. What happens if a spot gets too much seed or not enough seed?
That hurts my wallet because I put too many seeds where I didn't need them. So they will not produce as much of a yield because there's too much competition. And the same thing happens if I don't put enough seed on. That's in corn. Corn needs more seeds on an optimal spot, where soybeans actually compensate. You want to put less soybean seed in a good spot of a field. So you have to flip your prescriptions, or my maps have to be inverted for soybeans versus corn. So you have to do a separate prescription for corn and soybeans.
So do you need a different planter for each crop?
I use a separate planter for each crop, but typically some people use the same planter to plant, say, soybeans and wheat, or some people use the same planter to plant corn and soybeans. But in my instance, I've chosen, if I would like to get back to 2 planters and have the same planter plant soybeans and wheat, but financially right now it's just too expensive.
Does every farmer own their own equipment?
No. I do custom planting for a few other farmers, and I have some custom stuff done for me, like silo filling. I don't have silo filling equipment to make silage for my beef animals. So I hire that done from a neighbor that has that equipment himself.
If they don't want to use the equipment, can they plant it all by hand?
They could, but they wouldn't be able to do it on the scale that we can do with this equipment. Like you'd be able to plant maybe a half an acre or an acre by hand. When you say by hand, that means a hoe and a little push behind seeder. It'd be a long time.
So you're working with something a little bit bigger than the average garden.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's take a look to the outside of the planter, and then we'll bring Steve back again.
So again, this is the soybean planter. This is the part that engages with the soil to drop our seed in the ground. This planter is going through the field this way. So this is the first thing that engages with the soil, and this is called a residue manager, or a trash wheel. That removes the residue from last year's crop. Because I'm a no-tiller, I don't plow or cultivate. There's some last year's plant residues on the soil surface that I want to move that to the side a little bit, because I want to place my seed in the soil with no residue of last year's crop around it. Because if I don't, then these discs could hairpin, which means I shove the residue down in the bottom of the trench, and then I've got residue next to the seed, which I don't want. And I put brand new discs on this past winter. I put this through the shop, worked on it for probably a day. New discs, properly shimmed them because they have to be tight at the front, so they maintain a nice true V trench where you put the seed. Then this is adjustable. This is a depth wheel that maintains how far into the soil you put the seeds. So this little handle up there is how you adjust the depth by about 1/4 inch increments. I better use metric. That'd be about a 6 millimeter increment. And then there's a seed firmer here that makes sure that the seed is in the very bottom of the trench. So you get a consistent depth with every seed, and then the seed is firmed into the soil so you get proper amount of water into each seed. Because if it's not pressed in, the water will imbibe, get into the seed at a different rate than its neighbor, and then its neighbor comes up at a different time, and that is our yield penalty over the course of the season. And then these wheels here are the closing wheels. They ride up like that, and this is a handle that adjusts the spring tension. There's a spring under here. So varying planting conditions, you would vary how much spring pressure goes on these wheels. And these wheels are spiked to do a little better job in my no-till scenario to make sure the trench is closed, or the seed slot is closed, because you want to have that totally closed, because if you're planting in a little bit damper conditions, as it dries out, that trench can open up and you can look right down and see the seed. And if that happens, it's not good news. It doesn't germinate very well, if at all.
Wow, so there's a lot of thought that's gone into the design of these big machines. They've really come a long way with technology over the last couple of years. So let's bring Steve on to answer a few more questions. And remember, you can put your questions in the chat and we'll get Steve to answer them live. Hi, Steve. Welcome back.
Hello again.
So, Steve, how much would a machine like this cost for a farmer?
Which machine, the tractor or the planter?
The planter.
The planter of a 20-foot size, you're probably looking at $150,000 if you buy it new.
Wow, and then you need the tractor to go with that, wouldn't you?
Yes, the tractors are probably 3 times that money for a size of tractor that you need to pull that.
Huh. And what's the difference? You mentioned that you're a no-till farmer. So what does that mean? And are there benefits to till versus no-till?
Well, in my topography, I prefer to no-till now. We have stony ground. When we used to plow, when I was my son's age, we used to plow and then we would have to pick stones. We owned a windrower and a picker that would do it from the tractor seat. And then we were having all kinds of erosion. We'd have water running off our fields into our ponds and into our ditches, and the water would run brown. Now with the no-till in my cover crop, doing things, I don't have to pick stones because I'm not bringing the stones to the surface. And I've got virtually no erosion now because I keep a green looking field. As you can see, this field's winter wheat, but the other fields look a little tinge of green because there's cereal rye that's going to come up, or it's on its way up. It's just not thick enough, but those roots hold the soil in place.
What do you mean when you say winter wheat?
Winter wheat is a crop that overwinters. So I planted this crop last September, and it's still dormant at the moment. You can see it looks a little bit brown. So with the warm weather we've had, this is starting to break dormancy, which means we're going to have to start managing it shortly with nitrogen. But with the weather forecast, we're going to turn cool again this week. So we won't put nitrogen out for this winter wheat for the next week or two at least. So
are there differences for growing soybeans, wheat, and corn?
Absolutely. They all take different amounts of nutrients and different management at different times.
Do you have a favorite crop to grow?
My favorite crop every year is the one that does well.
And what do you do in the winter when you're not in the tractor?
Winter is a busy time, and then I like to learn new things. So I go to quite a few meetings, farm meetings, to learn new technology and the latest up and coming things. I'm on a few different boards of farm groups, so I have to go to monthly meetings, and they're more focused over the winter and more frequent over the winter because that's not as our busy time. When we get to April, May, June, we got to be busy in the field. And then also fixing equipment. I plow snow for a living as well in the wintertime, so that keeps me busy. And I've got livestock. So
it sounds like you're really busy all year long.
Yes. Sometimes the winter is busier than summer, actually.
And then what do you do after the plants have been harvested? Is there somewhere that they go?
all the grain that we have here, most of it goes to a local elevator that distributes it in the use chain, whether that goes for ethanol, whether it goes for animal feed, or whether it goes to a Casco or an end user that's going to use it for food. So it's all growing the same way, goes in the same bin, but then goes to one of those three or four streams.
And wow, are they all harvested at the same time, or do you get a bit of a break between each crop?
Winter wheat will get harvested in mid to late July. Soybeans late September, early October typically, and then corn is late October, early November is when corn gets harvested.
Wow. And then how much seed would you be planting in a season?
How many seed? I have to plant about 1,000 acres of corn and about 600 acres of beans.
Wow, so that sounds like quite a lot. Would that be a large amount for a farmer or about typical?
I would say it's a medium amount probably.
Great. So not only is today the first day of spring, but it's also Canadian Agriculture Safety Week. So with all this big equipment getting ready to hit the roads this spring, it's important to stay safe, not just for you, but for our farmers. So Steve's going to show us how we can do that with the big equipment.
So as it's Canadian Agricultural Safety Week, I'd like to point out the sign on the back of our tractor here. This is a slow moving vehicle sign, or SMV sign for short. This signifies that this tractor is only doing 40K or less on the road. So when you see it, please be patient. Drivers now on the road seem to be less patient and want to get around us, whether it's on the left when there's oncoming traffic. Seen it numerous times. And now it seems they're even less patient and they're passing us on the right as well when there's no room to do so, and putting my life in danger and their own lives and other people's lives on the road. So please be patient when we're on the road. We can only do 40K on the road. We wish we could go faster, but our equipment's not made to go that fast. It's not safe to go that faster than that on the road. So that's what we can do. So we've got to get to the next field. All our fields are not in one spot. We've got to use the road to move equipment. We've got to move fertilizer wagons. We've got to move a sprayer. We've got to move the planter and tillage equipment. Please be patient with us on the road. We have to stay on the travel portion of the road. When we move off to the side, we risk ending up in a ditch. The white line is not to be crossed unless we're over width. We are not supposed to cross over the yellow line unless we're making a left turn. So we have to use the travel portion of the road. The shoulder is next that we use, but it's not legal for us to drive on the shoulder as well. So please be patient.
So there's nothing more important than safety when dealing with large equipment. So make sure you're patient when you see farm equipment on the road and you give your farmers a wave when you see them. And let's bring Steve back for one more set of questions. Welcome back, Steve.
Welcome.
Do you have any other pointers you want to share for Farm Safety Week?
Well, it's always a stressful time for us. It's probably we maybe get short on our temper because we're short of sleep, because we're probably working 16, 18-hour days to try and get the seed in the ground at an optimal time and get spraying done in an optimal time and have time for the family and crop scouting and all the things that have to be done. And it seems a short.
So are you planting the same thing in each of your fields year after year?
No, I have a 5-year rotation. We want to rotate crops and have a different crop in that field every year after year, because then it's an integrated pest management program where you can get away with less chemical and you have less pests. Your weed cycles change, your insect pressures change because you're moving to different crops. So where I have winter wheat here this year, I'll grow a cover crop after the wheat comes off in July. Then I'll plant corn in this field for 2026, and then this field will be soybeans in 2027. So we always grow a different crop in every year, and we try to break that disease cycle.
Do you ever have animals that come and eat your crops or have to replant?
Yes, I do. Typically, we don't replant, but we are feeding lots of society's livestock. We see lots of deer damage. We see lots of raccoon damage. sandhill cranes are really taking a number on some of our crops now on the hills on our light land. There's no legal hunting season for them yet, but they are becoming a problem. And lots of livestock below ground eat our crops. And that's stuff you don't see, but little army worm or corn borer or slugs, they can all eat our.
So I've got one more question before we have to wrap up for today. What is your favorite thing about your job?
The variability. Nothing, every day is different. I'm never doing the same thing every day. And sometimes a breakdown or something different throws a curveball at you, or a neighbor runs into trouble and they need some help. It's always, you never know what you're doing the next day.
So that's all we've got time for today. Thank you for such a great tour and the insight into a planter and all the technology available to a farmer. Is there anything you wanted to add before we leave?
Just for all the young kids, don't put out of your mind being involved in agriculture. There's all kinds of things with technology. You can work outside, work with computers, work with technology. And every graduate that graduates from an ag school or even involved in ag, you get to pick which job you get. There's about 3 job opportunities for every graduate. So agriculture is a huge employer in this province. So don't overlook agriculture for a job.
I definitely would like to echo that. Agriculture is an amazing industry with lots of different opportunities. So we'll thank Steve again, and thank you for everyone that joined us for today's virtual field trip. We had a great time with all of you, and we hope you learned something today. Remember to support your local farmers and food processors and stay safe when they're all on the roads. So if you had a great time today, please fill out our survey with the link in the comments for a chance to win an Ontario Fair passport, valid for you and a guest, to enter almost every agricultural fair in Ontario. So have a great rest of your day. Happy spring, and Steve, happy planting.
Thank you.